Hey everyone, Tom Butwin here for Premier Guitar. Today we are checking out a trio of solid body electric guitars. Of course, a solid body electric guitar is basically a blank canvas for a million different ways that you can interpret that type of instrument. We have three today to check out, all very different, all very unique, and of course not all encompassing, but three very cool versions of solid body guitars nonetheless. From Gibson, you know him, you love him. It's the Les Paul Studio. This is brand new. Not the Les Paul Studio, that's been around for like 40 years, but this iteration of the Les Paul Studio is brand new from Gibson. The Studio is, of course, the more affordable version of what you might get out of a Les Paul standard, but with all the stuff that ultimately really matters, which is the playability, the feel, and the sound. This version is no different. So it has a mahogany body with the plain maple cap, and like I said, you can actually see the grain through this burst finish, and it's got a weight relief body, which it's not going to put you into like neck dive territory. I think it's still very balanced feeling, but it's definitely a little bit more manageable than your like typical Les Paul, which is really, really heavy a lot of times. So longevity, if you have a long session, a long gig, obviously comfort is king, and you don't want to sacrifice sound or anything like that, and it doesn't do that, but I think they've achieved what they were going for here with the weight relief body. So mahogany on the body, maple on the top, like I said, also mahogany neck, of course. And speaking of the neck, one of my favorite features on the guitar is the binding on the neck. In Les Paul Studios of years past, you're not necessarily going to get binding on the neck, but you do on this version. It's really aesthetic on the body, but on the neck, it does actually change the way it feels, which, like I said, like I've said before about pretty much any guitar I've talked about here on Premier Guitar, the neck feel is so important. And yes, it looks cool and it looks great and really nice and finished, but there's just something about a bound neck that feels right. The fret ends feel better. The rollover feels really, really nice. And that matters when you pick up a guitar. I mean, it really does matter. Again, looks cool, but on the neck, it actually adds something, I think, that is worth talking about and worth noting. The neck profile is a slim taper profile, so it's not going to be your massive baseball bat type Les Paul neck that has existed on certain iterations of the guitar. It's very manageable, very playable, and very, very comfortable. Where this guitar really starts to kind of set itself apart and add a ton of value in the studio version of Les Paul is the electronics. So there's nothing too crazy or outlandish at first glance when it comes to your typical Les Paul electronics layout. You got your three-way toggle switch, and you've got your 2-volume, 2-tone control configuration down here. Where it does get kind of interesting is the Burst Bucker Pro pickups, which are in this, but they have sort of a secret weapon, which, you know, if you're a Les Paul purist, you're not always going to be looking for something like this, but you do have coil tapping, and in this case, it's very cool because you have separate taps for each one of the pickups. So you have a really, really wide variety of tones that you can get out of one guitar, which if you go back to the studio concept of the guitar in general, makes a ton of sense because you can kind of bring your one guitar that is comfortable to play, that's lightweight enough to play for a long time if you happen to be in the studio, but also gives you a lot of variety in tones that you can bring to the table which if you are a session guitar player, if you are an artist in your own right, is nice to be able to dial in different things very quickly as you're writing or trying out parts. And this guitar allows you to do that. You're not going to get like a Strat style single coil tone out of this, but what you will get is your classic Gibson humbucker sound paired with, when you hit that tap, what I would call is like kind of maybe a more P90-ish type single coil thing going on, which is a really, really cool, usable and versatile sound. From Zemaitis, we have the SCW22. Now, if you are familiar with Zemaitis guitars, you are probably thinking of their classic metal top guitars that have all this beautiful etching and artwork on them. They're really incredible, unlike anything else that you will see out there. This, though, the SCW22, is a more traditional take on a solid body electric guitar, but it still retains a lot of that Zemaitis aesthetic in the pickup surrounds. You've got, some of it on the bridge here, headstock, and even on the electronics cover plate on the back. So you still know it's a Zemaitis guitar. It carries on that lineage very well, but without that metal top. So this guitar is a basswood bodied guitar. Now, admittedly, even on the Zemaitis website, they say basswood is a often misunderstood tone wood, which I think is probably true, but I like it. It's actually, I've played some guitars with basswood bodies before, and I dig it. Not too heavy by any means, but also still very balanced with the maple neck and ebony fingerboard. So overall, feels great, and this finish is pretty ridiculous. It's awesome. I love a headstock and body that are the same color, particularly this really cool kind of, I guess I would personally call it a pewter color. Some appointments that they've added here, things you don't have to upgrade. Locking tuners. Love locking tuners, make string changing a breeze. Bone nut, very, very cool. And then this bridge, they call it the flower wheel bridge. Really, really aesthetically pleasing, but also obviously functional at the same time. So perhaps most importantly, let's talk about the electronics. So electronics, we do have 2 pickups, 2 humbuckers, PAF-inspired virtuoso humbuckers, as they call them. They have a really cool, dynamic, kind of almost acoustic-y vibe to them. I really like them, and like I said, I think they pair well with what a basswood body does for you. Simple controls, volume, tone, 3-way toggle switch. This guitar has a very specific character, and the simple controls just allow that to ring through and, get out of the way of itself, sort of. Just volume, tone, 3-way toggle switch, limited options, but all the essential options that you need with a 2-humbucker guitar. So it's a new take on a classic Zemaitis design, the SCW22. From Paul Reed Smith, we have the CE24. Now, the CE24 has 24 frets, as the name would imply, but the defining characteristic of this guitar, especially compared to a lot of the PRS lineup, and certainly compared to the other 2 guitars we're going to talk about today, is the fact that it has a bolt-on neck. Now, this is the first bolt-on neck guitar that PRS made in 1988, I believe. So it's been around in their lineup for quite some time. Obviously, it's gone through some changes. This is the most current 2024 version. We're going to talk about everything this has to offer. But again, defining characteristic, 24 frets, bolt-on neck, gets you that snappy bolt-on type tone, mahogany back and maple top. That's a pretty common combination of woods, and there's a reason why it's common. It works really, really well. It's got a nice weight to it, not too heavy though, and very balanced. Neck is maple with a rosewood fingerboard, But let's talk about what's really important about a neck. And when you pick this one up, it is extremely comfortable. The pattern thin carve is really cool, but that finish, to me, is what sticks out because it doesn't stick at all. It's very smooth, very, very comfortable to play. So some other features before we get to what is probably the most important part of the guitar, which is the electronics. Locking tuners. I know that this can be controversial, but I love locking tuners, and whenever I have the opportunity to have them, I want them because, let's be honest, I'm just lazy when it comes to changing strings. So they make that so much easier. It's really hard for me to argue with. The pros are definitely outweighing the cons when it comes to locking tuners, and Paul Reed Smith makes some of the best out there. No different on the CE24, they have locking tuners. Paired with that, you've got a tremolo, which is super fun. It's the only guitar out of the three today that has a tremolo, so that's really fun and cool too. Very usable, very stable, which is awesome. As far as electronics, you have the 8515 pickups on this guitar, and as is the case with so many PRS guitars, you do get a coil tapping option. You get the tone knob here, which pulls up, and you can tap these and get those, I would say, I mean, they're single coil-esque type tones, but there's almost like an acoustic quality that comes in when you pull that tone pot out. Simple controls, just volume and tone, and then of course the coil tap that we talked about, and a three-way toggle switch. These pickups are really, really great. They're, as Paul Reed Smith describes them, they have a lot of clarity, but a lot of punch and bottom end. And I think that's, you know, sometimes it's not accurate the way people describe things, but I do actually think that that is accurate. The clarity is notable on these pickups, especially on the lower three strings. It's really, really cool. Of course, that doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of what a solid body electric guitar can be. Obviously, there are just thousands of different options and ways that you can go about making an instrument like this, but these are three examples that I think embody a lot of the cool things that you can do with a solid electric guitar. Of course, as expected, go to the comments, talk about your favorite solid body electric guitars, maybe which one you like the best here, or if you had never heard of one of the three here, I would be interested to hear about that as well. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel and like this video so you don't miss anything in the future. And until then, once again, my name is Tom Butwin here for Premier Guitar, and I will see you in the next one.